Hello everybody, and thank you for listening. I would like to discuss the nature of constitutions with you for just a moment. I am a conservative who believes that the Constitution is a living and breathing document, but that is not the first question you should ask me. What you should first ask me is this: which one? I also happen to believe that a comparison is in order. There are living constitutions out there, they just don't apply to the United States of America. That's right, I believe that the British Constitution is a living and breathing document, and I'm going to explain why. I have 3 goals I wish to accomplish here. First, I want to highlight a small piece of the history of progressivism and how it relates to what I wrote. Second, I wish to show people how I came across this. I would not have stumbled into this idea if not for my continued curiosity with the era between 1900 and 1920. Third, I want to compare the 2 constitutions, the British and the American. It all starts with Woodrow Wilson. The notion that the United States Constitution is a living and breathing document is a Wilsonian construct. I cannot find anybody earlier who says these things. The first time Wilson makes this point is in his 1908 book, Constitutional Government in the United States, in which he says on page 57, quote, "Living political constitutions must be Darwinian in structure and in practice," end quote. He expands on this idea during the 1912 election in one of his speeches titled, "What is Progress?" Quote, "Society is a living organism and must obey the laws of life, not of mechanics. It must develop. All that progressives ask or desire is permission, in an era when development, evolution, is the scientific word, to interpret the Constitution according to the Darwinian principle. All they ask is recognition of the fact that a nation is a living thing and not a machine." End quote. Just these words right here, and knowing their source, gives us tremendous power. Modern progressives will hem and haw if you ask them straight up what they mean by living and breathing document, but with this you can nail them on it. This is how it was built. This is its foundation. By saying that progressives want to interpret it along the Darwinian principle, what Wilson is saying is that he wishes to substitute one version of meaning with another version of meaning, even while assuming the exact same words exist on the paper. Now, I really didn't say anything here you didn't already know. Just by watching the Supreme Court, you know that's what they want. They just never admit it. Wilson's background on this is not just highly interesting, it gives us an even greater ability to further erode the false reality that progressives live in. Wilson held other ideological beliefs that shine light upon the matter, such as his belief in what he called the spirit of the age. That is, the current generation is the only generation that matters. Now, it is true that the earth belongs to the living, but Wilson was no Jeffersonian. Jefferson believed that history was an important guide, while Wilson is just like every other progressive, or rather, most progressives are much more Wilsonian than they realize. They have no use at all for substantive history and tradition. It gets in the way of their schemes. Understanding what Wilson means when he talks about the spirit of the age is best summed up with what he told the Jefferson Club in 1911. Quote, "If you want to understand the real Declaration of Independence, do not repeat the preface." End quote. But what's in the preface? For most of us, that's the important things, but for Wilson, that's where you find all of the inconvenient things. Without the preface, all you have left is a list of grievances that are unmoored from the highly important anchor of natural law. Without the preface, all you have left is a list of grievances, the spirit of that age. Wilson's campaign for governor of New Jersey also gives us insight into his ideology. Wilson publicly stated that if he were to win his election, he would be an unconstitutional governor. Wilson explained that while his opponent would gladly fill the role of governor as described in the state constitution, he would not. He would go on to meddle in the affairs of the New Jersey congressional delegations and act outside of New Jersey constitutional prescription. As New Jersey's governor, Wilson acted much more like a prime minister than he did a governor. Woodrow Wilson was a huge fan of British parliamentarianism. That's how he knew how to act like a prime minister so well, and it's how I came across this. Wilson specifically cites Walter Bagehot numerous times in different speeches, as well as cites one of Bagehot's best-known books, The English Constitution, repeatedly in his 1887 PhD dissertation, Congressional Government, A Study in American Politics. So what of this British Constitution? Well, for starters, it is unwritten. What this means is that every single time you go to reference it, you can interpret it however and in whatever way you wish. Does that sound living and breathing to you? According to the website of Pearson Education, under the appropriate title of The Changing Constitution, as well as Parliament's own website, we find that their constitution only requires a simple 50 plus 1% majority to modify. Not 2/3 of both houses, not 3/4 of the states. Is the American Constitution starting to sound a lot more rock solid to you yet? Another webpage of Parliament makes it clear that the British Constitution relies upon 21 primary documents spanning back to the Magna Carta. How many spirits of how many ages does that make their Constitution subject to? And that's why it's so important to understand Woodrow Wilson in all of this. Everything you learned about his beliefs applies not to the American Constitution, but to the British Constitution. Now I can imagine that someone is sitting there saying to themselves that the amendments to the American Constitution inject a spirit of the age into it. This is true to a degree, but that is certainly not what Wilson was saying, and progressives today never say that. Their argument is always that the whole thing as it sits is subject to reinterpretation, or rather, they don't even argue the merits outright. As a contrast, our Constitution is written, you can see the words that comprise it, you can study what those words meant when it was ratified, and you can print a copy of it for yourself. You cannot print a copy of the British Constitution. It doesn't exist. That means that every time there is a constitutional question, they end up with a different and unique interpretation. I am a conservative who believes the Constitution is a living and breathing document, and I am relatively confident that I just got you to agree with me based on the history and the facts.